Well, maybe it's time to step up and step into your faith. Hello, and welcome to the Chaplain's Corner, where we expound upon the truth of God's Word, present actual scientific, archaeological, and historical arguments, and provide common sense answers in facing the challenges of today's anti-biblical arguments. We hope you will join us in learning more about defending your faith with truth, just for the record. And now, here's Chaplain Randall.
Good afternoon and welcome back, or welcome to all of you who are just newly tuning in. And shout outs, of course, to my wife Madeline and our son Judah, our regular listeners, including Carlene in Denver, Kimmy and Joan, Dino. Kimmy and Joan, by the way, missed you in church last week. Dino, Melissa, and Tom, and my friend and fellow chaplain Felipe, thank you for your help. And to my longtime friend Annie in Colorado, if you are listening, and of course Norm and everyone at the First Baptist Food Bank who they're there today, God bless you all. And please pray for a woman named Rosie who she has an injured leg and is dealing with pain. She needs prayer for her health. Now I'm asking for our listeners also to please pray for and keep in prayer Melissa with her migraines, and she and Tom are moving. Keep them in prayer, as that's a huge burden and chore. Darlene has an unspoken prayer request. My friend Raj is going through chemo. Jonathan with health issues after his vaccination boosters. And for the Lord to strengthen his faith and give him direction in his life. My friend's son Kyle just went through divorce and having a hard time, missing his kids. Please pray for peace and direction for him. And also my Uncle Carl, as he prepares to go to glory. Please pray the pain meds will keep him comfortable. He's down to taking them every hour now. 2 weeks ago, it was every 4 hours. We tried to go see him last Monday, and I have to say just about everything that could go wrong did go wrong when we tried to catch our flight on Allegiant Airlines. And I wanted my uncle to meet my son in person and see him one last time on this earth. And thanks to construction everywhere in this city, we were bottlenecked in traffic, which made us late. And then we missed the turnoff to parking, and then we couldn't find a parking place once we got there. And the TSA line was longer than I have ever seen it at this airport. And the agent at check-in wouldn't try to help us in the least. And I hate to say it, but I blew my top a little. And my wife had to put me in line. Thanks, honey. Love you. I remember a day not too long ago where the airlines tried to get their paying customers on their flights and tried to help them, sometimes even going out of their way, especially if they had special circumstances, such as an infant with them, but not today. You know, it's sad. People, in large part, do not care about other people. Big businesses do not care about the people who give them their money. I ended up donating $424 to Allegiant Airlines, against my will, by the way, because we couldn't make the flight. It's instances like this that try our patience and force us to ask the Lord why. Why couldn't we make it to see Uncle? And it is in these types of situations that we have to lean on our faith, truly, and trust in the Lord that he has reason for it and that he has reason in it. And who knows why? Perhaps God saved us from what would have been some catastrophic accident in Missouri, or perhaps he needed me here for some reason. And the only reason I can think of was because at the food bank last week, a woman named Rosie, whom I mentioned earlier, asked for prayer for her leg and overall health. Only the Lord knows. But yesterday, thankfully, we were pleased to see Uncle through a FaceTime call, and he saw and spoke with Judah, our son, and gave a word of advice. One of my favorite passages, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. Now, can I just share with you, we had a wonderful weekend in Newberry Springs, California, at my friend's lake house this weekend. And I know things happen, and we're not always able to be in church on Sundays. But Sunday, while there, I felt convicted. We were sitting there enjoying the lake and everybody out on the boats and the wave runners and enjoying. It was beautiful. But you want to know what a convicted Christian is? It's when you are not in church and you feel you are not really worshiping the Lord on the Sabbath. One more reason the Apostle Paul said, do not forbid the gathering of yourselves. It's not for us, but for God. I mean, it is for us, But it's for God because he established the Sabbath, and in his commandments he says to remember it, to keep it holy. We are to worship him, set a time aside to worship him, and it also benefits us, of course. So yes, I felt convicted. And God bless the Australian couple 2 weeks ago who were on vacation here in the States. They took time to come visit our church on Sunday morning because they realized how important it is for their own well-being as well, and to worship God. So now let's get back to part 3 of evidence for the flood. We were talking about the plates and the shifting, and before the flood, the earth probably had a 360-day year and a 30-day lunar month. As Genesis 1:14-16 states, the sun and moon were created as very good timekeepers. The 150th day of the flood was exactly 5 months after the fountains of the great deep broke loose. And you can reference that with Genesis 7:11, Genesis 7:24, and Genesis 8:4. 5 30-day months would be 150 days. 12 30-day months would be 360 days. The flood may have altered a 30-day lunar orbit. Now keep in mind, these are theories and possibilities that have been proposed by creation scientists using the descriptive verses from the Bible that informs us of the flood. They are 100% qualified and educated scientists, archaeologists, and geologists, as much as any non-secular scientists are. The difference is they use evidence from the Bible and actual facts from worldwide evidence to propose these theories, versus evolutionist believers who put their own spin on what they want to be true based on their agenda-biased guesswork. That's why evolution is called a theory. The flood was a catastrophic event that involved far more than falling rain. The earth shook violently and was accompanied by continuous thunder. The erupting fountains of the great deep darkened the sky. Some launched rocks fell back to the earth as glowing hailstones. Powerful electrical activity generated by the fluttering crust and the piezoelectric effect was unleashed, and torrents of water emerged from below. Psalm 18:7-15 says, "Then the earth shook and quaked, and the fountains of the mountains, or the foundations of the mountains, were trembling and were shaken. He made darkness his hiding place, his canopy around him, darkness of waters, thick clouds of the skies. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice, hailstones and coals of fire, lightning flashes in abundance. Then the channels of water appeared, and the foundations of the world were laid bare." Isaiah 24:18-20 uses terminology that likens a future global catastrophe to the destructiveness of the flood. "For the windows above are opened, and the foundations of the earth shake. The earth is broken asunder, the earth is split through, the earth is shaken violently. The earth reels to and fro like a drunkard." We know there will not be another global flood. Genesis 9:11 tells us that. So Isaiah is not saying the future destruction will be by flood waters. But there are other similarities which numerous commentators have described as an echo of the flood. Kyle and Delish, in their, I don't know that I said that right, in their highly respected Bible commentary, attribute the flood terminology to Isaiah's purpose in describing this judgment as a direct act of God that totally destroys the earth. They also point out that the foundations of the earth are the internal supports upon which the visible crust of the earth rests. And what we talked about earlier, the hydroplate theory calls those supports pillars. The thousands of points where the crust, because of its varying density and thickness, sagged to the floor of the subterranean water chamber. Notice the similarity of Isaiah 24:18-20 with Jasher 6:11, which says, "On that day the Lord caused the whole earth to shake, and the sun darkened, and the foundations of the world raged, and the whole earth was moved violently. And the lightning flashed, and the thunder roared, and all the fountains of the earth were broken up, such as was not known to the inhabitants before. And God did this mighty act in order to terrify the sons of men, that there might be no more evil upon the earth." The book of Jasher was an old Israelite writing, which means, or Jewish writing, which means the book of the upright, or the book of the just man. The book is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, often interpreted as a lost non-canonical book. Numerous forgeries purported to be rediscovered. Copies of this lost book have been written, and a different interpretation identifies it as a reference to the Pentateuch, an interpretation which is notably favored by the Jewish scholar Rashi, who lived a few centuries ago, in his commentary on the Hebrew Bible. Now, the Bible has two well-known predictions that the hydroplate theory helps explain. Before the flood, water was heating up immediately below the crust. This resulted in a global catastrophe that was predicted in Genesis 6:13 and 6:17. Since the flood, liquid rock, or magma, has been heating up in the Earth's core. Scientists have verified that, modern scientists. This will result in a global catastrophe that is remarkably consistent with the predictions in Matthew 24:7, Mark 13:8, Luke 21:11, and 2 Peter 3:7. Now we're talking about Revelation here, what's going to take place in Revelation. English translations of the flood account in Genesis 6 through 9 have lost some powerful, insightful meanings of a few key Hebrew words. The standard Hebrew English dictionaries have also missed the boat, so to speak. The failure lies primarily in using English words that describe our common experiences, but the flood was the most uncommon event since the creation. This has also contributed to the centuries of confusion and doubt concerning the flood. There's a wonderful article by G. Russell Akeridge, in his 1981 article, "The Hebrew Flood, Even More Devastating Than the English Translation Depicts." And one of those Hebrew words, gabar, is translated prevailed in most English translations of the above verses. And according to the HCL, which is the Hebrew and called the lexicon, gabar carries the idea of one powerful force overcoming another powerful force. Therefore, we must ask, what powerful forces opposed each other as the floodwaters rose to cover all pre-flood mountains? And that is that the rising floodwaters would have immediately drained into a 60-mile deep chasm formed by the widening rupture in the earth had it not been for the dynamic pressure of the fountains themselves. Now, the floodwaters came down, and from under the Earth's core, the heating caused fissures that shot a gigantic 62,000 per square inch pressure of these. It's supercritical water is what it's called. A large but unknown amount of addition pressure was provided by what basically is a nuclear effects. And they explain it in an article, vast energy generated and vast energy removed. So the two combined, coming together, one opens up, one comes down, the other comes up, and it shoots up like if you live here in Las Vegas, you go to the Bellagio, you see the fountains there, and you see the pressure that it takes to shoot this water 50, 60 feet in the air or more. I'm not sure exactly how high it goes, but that's a lot of pressure pushed through these little pipes. And basically the same thing with this heated water coming up, and the steam caused it to shoot up in the air, and it far dwarf the fountains there at the Bellagio and what they do. This was a major event with thousands or millions upon billions of tons of water pressure. Now, with a volcanic effect. And speaking of which, you look here. It's hard to fathom something with that much power, that much force. But you look at volcanoes and how they explode, and the ash spreads and lava shoots up and explodes rocks. The rock mountain explodes, and they fly for miles and miles around. And if you drive out here to the Valley of Fire in Las Vegas, which is north of town a few miles, you drive through beautiful red rock everywhere, and as you're coming around the loop on the way back over near Lake Mead, you see all this black rock just piled around and loosely scattered all over the place. Black rock. There's nothing else like it around. Where did it come from? There are no black mountains around. There's no black rock around. There's all these thousands of these black rocks lying around from some explosion centuries ago. It's amazing to see. It's amazing to think about. So, moving on, this chasm that was caused, a downward flutter of the sagging edge of the rupture tended to send the floodwaters into the 60-mile deep chasm, weakening the fountains even more. And for about the first 40 days of the flood, these powerful inertial and gravitational forces were overcome by the more powerful prevailing force of the expanding fountains. Once the rupture had widened enough and the height of the subterranean chamber had decreased enough, the fountains weakened sufficiently to reach a tipping point. Then floodwaters on the Earth's surface poured into the chasm, weakening the fountains even more. This sudden collapse produced the tallest, 60 miles high, and widest, 46,000 miles wide, waterfalls the world has ever known. One on each side of the rupture. The inpouring would have occurred as the edge of the fluttering plate was in the downward quarter of its 30-minute cycle. Therefore, at each point along the 46,000-mile-long rupture, the fountains were turned off within minutes, although not simultaneously, all on about the 40th day of the flood. Even after the fountains were shut off, vast amounts of water still under the crust continued to escape from the chambers, so the flood waters steadily rose up until the continental drift phase began on the 150th day of the flood. Now, I admit some of this stuff goes a bit above my pay grade. Some of it's hard to grasp, and I was reading bits and pieces so as not to bog the storyline down and listeners down, because it gets kind of in depth. But it's an amazing thing to think about. Now, shifting from that, I mean, that goes along the lines of what we talked about the prior 2 weeks with the evidence of flood, the flood waters. But what about the dinosaurs? Now, we touched a little bit upon that before, but this frequent question is asked in this way implies many questions related to dinosaurs, a word meaning terrible lizards, by the way. And when did they live? What killed the dinosaurs? What were they like? What does the Bible say about them? Could the ark have held so many large animals? Why are there bones and fossils found inside Antarctica and the Arctic Circle, unlivable places too cold and lacking food? There were about 500 different types of dinosaurs. Most were large, some even gigantic. One adult dinosaur was as tall as a 5-story building. Many questions will be answered if we focus on one question: when did they live? Two quite different answers are usually given. Evolutionists say that the dinosaurs lived, died, and became extinct at least 60 million years before man evolved. We know that can't be true, because there's no way they can have a timeline or guesstimate a timeline of that kind of expanse. It's impossible. There's no facts to back them on that. Christians believe God created all living things during the creation week. So man and dinosaurs lived at the same time. If we look at the evidence sorting out these two very different answers, should be easy. Did dinosaurs become extinct at least 60 million before man evolved? No. Almost all textbooks that address the subject say they did. Of course, movies and television vividly portray this. One hears it even at Disney World and other amusement parks. Some will say that every educated person believes this. We frequently hear stories that begin with impressive sounding phrases such as 200 million years ago when dinosaurs ruled the earth, but none of this is evidence. Some of it is an appeal to authority, but evidence must be observable and verified. That is what true science is. Did man and dinosaurs live at the same time? Scientists in the former Soviet Union have reported a layer of rock containing more than 2,000 dinosaur footprints alongside tracks resembling human footprints. Obviously, both types of footprints were made in mud or sand that later hardened into rock. If some are human footprints, then man and dinosaurs lived at the same time. Similar discoveries have been made in Arizona. Were it not for the theory of evolution, few would doubt that these were human footprints. Now, before 1986, the film Footprints in Stone and John Morris' book, tracking those incredible dinosaurs, popularized the idea that dinosaur tracks and human tracks were together along the banks of the Paluxy River near Glen Rose, Texas. Later, it was learned that a particular dinosaur made those tracks when it was walking uphill. Because of these errors, the film and book are no longer distributed. Creationists will claim that some of these man-like tracks were made by humans. But of course, now they are not in print anymore, so we cannot determine that from there. In Uzbekistan, 86 consecutive horse hoof prints were found beside supposedly 90 to 100 million year old dinosaur tracks. Evolutionists have almost as much difficulty believing that horses and dinosaurs live together as they do in believing man and dinosaurs live together. Horses allegedly did not evolve until many millions of years after the dinosaurs became extinct. So how do they explain that? How do they explain these anomalies that come up in their belief system? They don't. There was an article February 5th, 1984, called A Horse from the Dinosaur Epoch. Of course, it was Russian. It was a Moscow Truth. Soft dinosaur tissue has now been recovered from several dinosaurs, believe it or not, 3 tyrannosaurs, or T-Rexes as they are called, and 1 hadrosaur. It is ridiculous to believe that soft tissue can be preserved for 60 million years. But it could be preserved since the flood, which was about 5,000 years ago. The book of Job is one of the oldest books ever written. In it, God tells of his greatness as the creator and describes an animal called Behemoth as follows. Now behold, Behemoth, which I made as well as you, he eats grass like an ox. Behold, now his strength is in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. He bends his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron. That's Job 40, 15 through 18. Sounds like a dinosaur to me. Marginal notes in many Bibles speculate that Behemoth was probably an elephant or a hippopotamus, but those animals have tails like ropes. Behemoth had a tail like a cedar. Any animal with a tail as huge and strong as a cedar tree is probably a dinosaur, possibly a brontosaurus. Also, Job 40, 19 through 24 says this giant, difficult-to-capture animal was not alarmed by a raging river. If the writer of Job knew of a dinosaur, then the evolution position is wrong, and man saw dinosaurs. The next chapter of Job describes another huge, fierce animal, a sea monster named Leviathan. It was not a whale or a crocodile because Hebrew language had other words to describe such animals. Leviathan may be a plesiosaur, a large seagoing reptile that evolutionists say became extinct 60 million years ago before man evolved. Other ancient writing describe Behemoth and Leviathan as well. And for the past 3 centuries, reports have come from the Congo in Western Africa that dinosaurs exist in remote swamps. These eyewitness stories are often from educated people who can quickly describe dinosaurs. 2 expeditions to the Congo led by biologist Dr. Roy Mackle of the University of Chicago never saw dinosaurs, but interviewed many of these witnesses and concluded that their reports were about dinosaurs and were apparently true. If any of these accounts are correct, man and dinosaurs were contemporaries. Consider the many dragon legends, for instance. Most ancient cultures have stories of artwork of dragons that strongly resemble dinosaurs. The World Book of Encyclopedia states that the dragons of legend are strangely like actual creatures that have lived in the past. They are much like the great reptiles, dinosaurs, in other words, which inhabited the earth long before man is supposed to have appeared on earth. Dragons were all generally evil and destructive. Every country had them in its mythology. The simplest and most obvious explanation for so many common descriptions of dragons from around the world is that man once knew the dinosaurs. What about the famous painting or artwork you'll see in many weavings and tapestries of St. George fighting the dragon? That's all over Europe. I'm just not sure who St. George was. Anyway, thank you for joining us. We'll continue this on dinosaurs next week. Lord willing, God bless you all. Take care.
Thanks for joining us here today at the Chaplain's Corner. We hope today that you've been inspired and encouraged to learn more about God's Word, to step out in faith and strengthen your walk with the Holy Spirit. If you're not sure what a personal relationship with Jesus Christ means and you would like to, please contact this station and leave your information so I can discuss what that means with you personally. And that number is 702-731-5588. That's 702-731-5588. And if you're looking for a great home church, come join us on Sunday mornings at First Baptist Church on 4400 West Oakey Boulevard, where Christ is honored and the Bible is preached. This is Chaplain Randall, and until next time, may God keep you in His loving care. Shalom, and God bless.